26-27 budget speech debates. She joins us to unpack what this budget means for young people, gender equality, and our fight against gender-based violence. Minister Chombo, welcome to the rush. Can I still make noise? How you welcome her? Like back in the day?
In the building.
We have to follow government protocol now.
I mean,
hey. When I was on to both sides.
like, can make a Fox, and I came in to hello, usually.
Lesego is in the building. Meow, meow.
You know what it is.
How are you feeling?
I'm good. How are you? I'm excited to be back here. I haven't been here in a while.
In a very long time.
I'll do better.
Wherever I go, I meet young girls who are inspired by the work that you do. Baba ngobare babata ona di beauty queen. Baba ngobare babata ho ya ko parlamente. I think a few weeks ago, MOG, we were out at Lensoleta Junior School.
Yeah.
And there was a kid there, Are Obata Hona, a beauty queen, but unfortunately, Kola Ping Bamo discourage. But the kid looks the part. She acts the part. And you know what? The minister is very busy, but we'll try to find time for or at the very least, just a video call with such a child to tell them, no, go for it. You never know where it might land you. So good to have you here.
I'd love to do that. We should do the video call, actually.
Yeah, I'll make sure that I get the teacher's number and then we make that happen. Let's get into our budget and ministry focus, starting with, before we get into your budget response, you were at a quota in Mokhanene yesterday, and one of the key issues that you raised was the need for your beneficiaries to understand the core mandate of your ministry. Can you briefly unpack it for us so that as we go along, as we point fingers, as we ask questions, we know exactly what we're dealing with?
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much. And let me just thank everybody who's tuning in right now. And I think I've been saying this quite often this year, even to the team, that we need to all realign to the core mandate of the ministry. Over time, the ministry has been treated as a social desk and a social advocacy desk, but that's not what we are. We are intended to remove the structural barriers that exclude women and young people from benefiting from the economy. And that means milao, that means the policy, that means ensuring that each and every program, every project across sectors actually embeds the needs of young people and women in those. And I say women not to exclude men. I think the right thing to say is actually that in all the programs there's gender equality, and where there's need for equity, I'll give a simple example. This need ya gore mongwe le mongwe a itse tiro ya rona e simolotse go goreng re le Batswana gantsi tota re lela go lephateng la banana le merero ya bonga kere, and rightfully so, because re ba bueledi mme re eletsa gore Batswana ba boya ba tlhaloganya gore di sector ka go harologana bone ditiro tsa bone ke eng, rona re tsena ha kae. Indeed re ba bueledi mme ebile ha di sector di sa kgoneng teng, how do we cushion them? And a simple example that I gave in Mokhanene yesterday was with regards to labor issues. And I was telling them I'm rushing to Parliament. I need to go and debate on the Labor Committee and Committee of Supply speech, because I wanted to intervene to the minister and say, how far with the internship program review? Because our interns currently are crying about the stipend, they're crying about the lack of mentorship, placement in internship, they're crying for they're doing all of the work and not actually being interns and learning. They're crying about lack of placement in rural areas, etc. Now, our job is to push for that review. Is to also guide and advocate for the needs of young people as the Ministry of Labor is doing the review. I also spoke about remote work as well as export of labor. Regulations for remote work. And with regards to export of labor, but the issue is trafficking and so on and so forth. So the role of the ministry in that instance is not to come up with the remote jobs. No. The role of the ministry in that instance is not to take over the internship program and say, we're going to run it because it has to do with banana. It's to work with the Ministry of Labor and collaborate with them for them to eventually fulfill that which banana basetoka. Another example is last year there was the Employment and Labor Relations Bill which was being amended, and what I had done, or what we had done as a ministry, was advocated for employment young gender muting. Tsenyang gore there should be no discrimination at the workplace mo teng. Tsenyang gore there should not be discrimination on the basis of age mo teng, jalo jalo. So we map out the needs of young people as well as the gaps in terms of gender equality across all sectors. They are embedded as opposed to overhauling and taking over the jobs of those sectors.
From what I'm gathering from as you speak, is the model which the ministry is trying to take is moving from one, not just funding to sustainability, right? And then moving from dependability to being able to scale and have bankable people, bankable businesses. How do we get there though, to where we are sustainable?
The first thing, to be honest, with regards to what I also just said, is effective mainstreaming. That's how we can be sustainable. I'll give an example. The vice president spoke of the 1.31 billion that's allocated to MSMEs. For us to be sustainable, especially with regards to funding and supporting youth businesses, it means that each and every institution that's entrusted with a portion of that 1.31 billion should be mindful. One should be deliberate to say we need to fund young people. It can't just be the Ministry of Youth funding youth businesses through YDF. No, that's 1.31 billion. The ministry gets such a small fragment of that 1.31 billion. So every sector that is afforded that amount for funding or financing of MSMEs should be deliberate, first and foremost, to say that funda banana. Secondly, to say banana boni. How about funda? Perhaps they need more mentorship than a typical business person. Repayment as well. Can banana repay the ordinary way as everybody else repays? Creatives peak time is end of year. Is it really practical and sustainable for us to say creatives must be repaying every month like everybody else? So in actual fact, for funding or financing of youth enterprises that is intended to be sustainable, it needs to be subjective and mindful to the needs of young people. Now, a lot of sectors don't do this, by the way, but technically, I think we my colleagues, but minister, innovation, for example, it's innovation, it's just straightforward, it's technical, or technical, and we always bring in that voice to say it can't just be technical. Things affect women different from the way they affect men. Things affect young people differently from the way they affect younger children or the older generation. And so our job is just to ensure that everyone is mindful of those needs and those differences between young people and different generations, as well as women and men.
Now, in your budget response, you were very clear that the Ministry of Youth and Gender Affairs does not directly create jobs, build roads, or generate electricity. Now, let's understand the government and how it's structured in line with your ministry. Can you please explain how it sits within the government, as well as expanding on its core mandate?
Yes, so I'm going to just start this off by noting as an example the youth policy Elmhor will be tabling in Parliament in this session of Parliament. And what it's intended to do is to really show how different sectors must be playing in the space of youth development, all the way from innovation, like a innovation fund. So the innovation funding, banana funding, Ghana as innovators or in different boards, the innovation is to embed young people in different sectors. But particularly when we speak of jobs, I'll give an example. As the various projects, question one, what are we doing deliberately to ensure that young people do get those contracts? That's what my job is. Secondly is to say, those who have been given those contracts, what regulations or what criteria or what the word I'm looking for is, have we set prerequisite standards to say, so that's where I'd come in, and I can't jump into Minister Ramokhapi's ministry, right, and say who will be HC. So my job at cabinet level is to say, Minister Ramokhapi, my advice or my humble request is that we need to set a prerequisite to every single contractor to say so job creation from the stance of the ministry is one, through binding different sectors through policy, like I've said. Two, through mapping the various ongoing programs and projects and offering that technical support to the various ministries. And this is the best way that you can get young people to work. We even go to the extent of linking those various sectors with different associations. An example is the Botswana Youth Contractors Association. They had come to the Ministry of Youth and Gender Affairs for a courtesy call. And when I went to see the minister, wa bonno, ke ne ke a mo tlhalosetsa gone gore kana go na le banana ba ileng gore ke ma kontraka ba re ga gona ditiro ba re ba iletsa gore lephata la lona le nne le ba hira le ba ha ditshono jalo jalo. And in that instance ke buella bone, I passed them over to the ministry gore ya ka rira bonno yana ma kontraka ra ke ba the Contractors Association ya banana ke. So our job in the instance of creating jobs is really supporting other sectors technically. Sometimes we also get requests for banana in these areas. Can you please supply us with the names? And that's where it would also come in. Yeah.
Okay, so transformation is what I'm gathering, right? All very exciting, very exciting. But I think, Minister, one thing that anybody will always tell you is that Botswana, when it comes to policies and coming up with a document, coming up with a framework, we do that very well, right? The implementation, that's where we sort of get it wrong. Like, to give an example, when we talk of economic transformation and jobs and skills development, I think it can also extend to GBV prevention and survival support, right? How will all of these translate into sort of real life protection when we talk of GBV? How will it translate to a 23-year-old Oko Moshopa in terms of tangible programs that can work and the implementation will actually be happening?
Yes. Starting on implementation, I actually spoke about this as well in Parliament, and I said our greatest weakness as a country is not the lack of strategy or the lack of policy. It's not. As a matter of fact, I think when I started government, I was a little, I wouldn't say resistant, but I was very frustrated about the need to strategize and policies, etc. Because I felt like there is a need for everything that we do to translate into day-to-day impact. But the reality is that, and I mentioned this as well, that the role of government is the role of government. It's not to overtake what private sector should do, what Botswana should do. And we've lost that over time as well, where we're juggling between let's create an enabling environment and let's be the implementers of everything. Let's run all the programs. Let's run all the projects. Government does not have capacity to begin with to run all the projects, all the programs, etc. What we ought to do is to create an enabling environment for Foxy. Foxy that's number one. Two, when we speak of implementation, I agree that our policies do need to translate into tangible action, and I applauded the Minister of Finance on the Botswana Economic Transformation Program model. Policy. People were shut in a room for weeks, and others submitted their proposals and they said, I have this project, it has potential to hire so and so people, all I need is a piece of land. It's problem solving, typical problem solving, and that's a model that we are now adopting at the Ministry of Youth and Gender Affairs, because there is a need. Certainly we cannot take away the need for government to come up with policy and law, because that's where we enshrine rights, that's where we enshrine responsibilities. Indeed, from there, what we ought to move to, let us problem solve and remove bottlenecks straight away and assign responsibilities somewhere. It's not enough to have a vision, assign responsibilities, assign tasks, set timelines. We also need consequential management. And I think that's the issue that I have noticed is lacking. That's why there's no sense of urgency, because nothing is going to happen, which is a problem. It's a problem. The issue is not lack of ideas. The issue is not lack of assigning of tasks. The issue is not setting of timelines. They are set. But what happens when they are not met? And in my humble opinion, that's where consequential management comes in. So implementation can't just be policy, implementation, plan, assign responsibility, certain timelines. It's not enough. What happens when it doesn't happen? That's my first thing. And then you spoke as well about making sure, or how all of these grant plans will touch the lives of Botswana on a day-to-day And you also made an example, Kayana Khanya GBV. When we speak of, I'll go back to the example of 1.31 billion for MSMEs,
Yeah.
and how does it touch the life of a 13-year-old, as you've said, or the life of a young woman. To us, GBV prevention is not just about managing emotions. It's not just about police are well resourced, our courts are well resourced. It's also about making sure that young women don't have to succumb to circumstances because they don't have money, which is a reality. The economic disempowerment of women leaves them susceptible to violence. That's the bread and butter. Now we're being insensitive in a sense. We're failing to see the underlying issue here. So to us, when we say others 1.31 billion were MSME, we're not just looking at economic advancement in a general sense, but also looking at economic advancement so that women don't have to stay in violent situations, so that a woman never has to depend on an abuser. But likewise, more money that is being targeted towards or directed towards refurbishing government facilities, and this procurement quota, youth, women, and persons living with disabilities quota, 20%. They must benefit from this properly.
I know Fox has a very important question. I know he sits differently when he has a question. So let me ask my question so that he can ask. Okay, there's rhetoric, let's say, right, where some people feel that youth and gender issues are being treated as add-ons. Like it's not neat. It's just rhetoric that you get, that being treated as add-ons. As a ministry, do you have safeguards to sort of ensure that they don't seem as that and they are not that? And also, one other question. Do you think we're being impatient with the current pace of governance? Honan?
Question one. Yes, we do have safeguards, and it's simple. It's law. It's law. Fox, how can you introduce our beauty queen who lives a lawyer? And the law really plays such an important role in governance. Let me tell you this. It plays such an important role because that is where you give people rights. The reason why youth and gender issues are typically treated as rhetoric is because advocacy. That's what I was leading with when I started to say it can't just be we advocate for women to be included. No, it must be the law says. The law says women should be included in this way, in this way, in this way, in various sectors. But what we're doing as a ministry, as much as we want each and every law to recognize the needs for Zabanana and women and men as well, we're also coming up with our own laws. The youth policy that I'll be tabling in Parliament proposes a Youth Development Act, which will cover everything young people. So even if those sectors do not enshrine rights for young people in their various laws, we'll cover it with the Youth Development Act. Number two, when it comes to issues of gender-based violence, we are currently drafting our gender-based violence legislation or anti-gender-based violence legislation. Again, it's so that when we say protect victims, it's not a rhetoric, it's not an add-on, it's not a social responsibility. It is a law and it is their right, which the state has to fulfill. And we also hope to have a gender equality legislation once we complete the review of our gender policy. Rights that are enforceable, straightforward. And enforceable, I don't just mean individual to individual. Even by cabinet, even by ministers, even by parliament, by the police, by everybody who has power and who has been trusted with the responsibility of serving the people. The people must have rights to enforce against those who have been entrusted with those responsibilities. Two, in terms of patience, I think two things can be true at the same time.
Tell us. Tell us.
I think two things can be true at the same time.
Yeah.
Our people are suffering, and it's true. Our people are in dire need, and it's true. And that need is urgent, and it's true. But likewise, the government is putting in the best effort in the given circumstances. And I met a lady, I remember her so vividly. I met a lady, Builder's Warehouse. I hope she'll remember me. On a Sunday, I was buying paint. And she said, Minister, why don't you ever defend yourself? huh? She ranted first. She said, you're slow, you guys are slow as a government, we're running out of patience. And then from there I said, I understand, and I explained to her what we're doing at the ministry. And then she said, okay, but why don't you ever like come up with a comeback? And I said, because two things can be true. So when a young woman tells me that, Minister, your law is taking long, and I'm suffering, I'm in an abusive relationship, I don't have protection, it is true they are suffering. And likewise, I cannot come with a defense and say, yeah, I'm gonna as leaders, we ought to be sensitive to the fact that indeed our people are suffering, right? But one thing that I can say today is that being mindful of that, we're putting in every effort possible. The pace does need to be faster. It does need to be faster. But for it to be faster, it's us to change a government machinery that has been running the same way for years. And it's not something, unfortunately, I wish it could happen overnight. I wish it could happen in 1 year. It doesn't. And slowly but surely, we are also trying to bring in like-minded people, right? But even then, you're trying to bring in like-minded people with a budget that's at a deficit. So essentially, government is not even recruiting currently, which means you're left with transforming mindsets. And we all know that that takes a very long time as well. So we are juggling a lot of pieces at the same time. But one thing that I can assure Batswana, we have their best interests at heart. And in everything that we do it with integrity, and we do it for them and for their lives to be better. And I must say this personally as well, that everything that I do is for their lives to be better. Sometimes it's slow, sometimes it comes with frustration, sometimes indeed they suffer because the pace is not fast enough. But it is never out of lack of understanding or even care and commitment to making their lives better. That is always an underlying principle in everything that we do. Yeah.
So Kana, you are the Minister of Youth,
Yes.
while the youth radio station, which means responsible reconnect. And I'm thinking, find time in your schedule, at least every 2 weeks, come here to address issues, because you know that the questions that I sent you, there's still too many to answer at a go. But when I message you, there's something that we're all so passionate about here at Darren FM, school sports. The last time it was played from start to end, it was back in the year 2018. So, Topo Arike Obotsoro, what's your take on school sports returning? Do you have anything to say in line with that? Because your youth also fall within that rank. Sports are a way to make money outside of formal employment.
Yes. Thank you very much, Topo, for the question. In fact, school sports for me, and linking it to the work that we do at the ministry, is not just for young people to be fit and for young people to make money. It also ties into young people being engaged for the baskaba, baraelesega. Re bua ka substance and alcohol abuse ko lephateng. I get our young people at the age of 12, young people are using drugs, etc. And an example that I always give is that in Botswana, there are not many safe spaces for our young people to go to. And likewise, there are not many safe activities for our young people to do. And so school sport for me is hands down, hands down, hands up, hands down necessary.
Two things can be right at the same time, hands up and hands down.
Yes,
Yeah.
It's necessary, and I think there's no debating that. I trust that the Minister of Child Welfare and Basic Education, as well as the Minister of Sport, what they're trying to do is to just find the best way for it to be implemented. But there's no doubt about the fact that school sport is necessary. Our young people, over and beyond the books. That's the first thing. 2, they do need to stay fit. 3, they need to be engaged. They need to be engaged in things that challenge them, in things that build character, in things that build diligence. To me, sport and Tota sport builds character. It really builds character. You have to endure, you have to be resilient. So there are a lot of wonderful things about sports we support, and we look forward to having it back.
So week 1, we'll see you again on the 17th of March.
Okay.
Today we were hosting Honorable Lesego Chombo, the Minister of Youth and Gender Affairs. We were talking about recent developments, and we still have a lot to touch on, including issues surrounding the 2026-27 budget speech. One of the things that I've noted in my line of work is that lady intervention but a lack of information and knowledge ba miss the opportunity sales. So next time we'll talk about YDF and everything that your office is doing to reach out to Botswana. So all the best. Happy. A leader ensures that no one is treated unjustly, and those who need help the most receive the most constructive help.
Thank you very much, Fox. Actually, the 17th is a day after I give my Committee of Supply Response in Parliament. So the 17th is perfect.
Thank you so much. Have a lovely one.
Lovely. Thank you.